Welcome to your free English lesson. This series will focus on modal verbs. There are 4 intended learning outcomes to achieve for this lesson. 1. We are learning to use modal verbs to ask for permission politely. 2. We are learning to give or refuse permission politely. 3. We are learning to recognise formal and informal permission language. 4. We are learning to use permission modals in sentences. It is important to write when you are asked to. It helps you to learn. You can use a whiteboard, but ideally, a notebook would be best. That way, you can keep a record of your learning. Think about how you would answer these questions. Do people need permission to enter someone's property? What must people ask permission for? When do you ask for permission? Permission means allowing someone to do something or asking if it is okay to do something. Permission is simply when someone says you can or cannot do something. Can I use your phone? This is asking for permission. Yes, you can. This is giving permission. You can't park here. This is refusing permission. Which of these asks for permission? Which gives permission? Which refuses permission? You may enter. You may not run. Can I use the restroom? You may enter gives permission. You may not run refuses permission. Can I use the restroom? Asks for permission. Modal verbs can help us ask for permission, give permission, and refuse permission. Here are the main permission modals: can, could, may, be allowed to, can't or may not. Can asks or gives permission. Here is an example. Can I open the window? Can is used in informal and common speech. Could gives a polite permission request. Here is an example. Could I leave early? Could is used in polite speech. May gives formal permission. Here is an example. May I ask a question? May is used in formal speech. Be allowed to gives permission in rules and situations. Here is an example. Students are allowed to use calculators. Be allowed to is neutral in speech. It is neither common, informal, or formal. Can't and may not gives refusal or no permission. Here is an example. You can't walk your dog here. Can is used in common speech. Can not, can't. May is used in formal speech. May not. Here is the structure for asking permission. Can I plus base verb. Can I borrow your pen? Could I plus base verb. Could I sit here? May I plus base verb. May I come in? Be plus subject plus allowed to plus base verb. Am I allowed to go? The punctuation at the end of a question is a question mark. Here is the structure for giving permission using each of the modal verbs. You can plus base verb. You can use my laptop. You may plus base verb. You may begin. subject plus be allowed to plus base verb. We are allowed to leave early today. Remember, be changes depending on the subject and the tense. Here is the structure for refusing permission. You can't plus base verb. You can't eat here. Can't is considered as common prohibition or refusing permission. You may not plus base verb. You may not enter. May not is considered as formal prohibition or refusing permission. Subject plus be not allowed to plus base verb. They are not allowed to cheat. Remember, be changes depending on the subject and the tense. Formal and informal permission. Can is most common in everyday speech. May is more formal and common in schools, workplaces, and written rules. Could and be allowed to sounds more polite. Informal. Can I use your eraser? Formal. May I use your eraser? Informal. Can we leave now? Polite. Could we leave now? Are we allowed to leave? Modal verbs can show permission in the past, the present, and the future. Core timeline. Time, present, past, future. Common forms. In the present, can, may, and am, are, or is allowed to. Past, could, and was or were allowed to. Future, can, and will be allowed to. Modal verbs themselves often do not change form very much. Instead, English changes the time expression or uses structures like be allowed to and have been allowed to. Present permission, informal. You can sit here. Students can use dictionaries. Can is common and informal. Formal. You may enter now. Employees may work remotely. May is formal and polite. Can is most common in spoken English. May is often used in rules, notices, and formal situations. Past permission, general past permission. When I was younger, I could stay up late. As children, we could play outside any time. Could shows a general rule. Specific permission or event. Students were allowed to leave early on Friday. Yesterday, we were allowed to take an extra break. Be allowed to shows one specific situation. Sometimes could can be overused when it is used for every past situation. Future permission. Clear future permission. You will be allowed to travel as a group. They will be allowed to retake the test next week. Will be allowed to shows clear permission for a future action. Possibility or arrangement. You can visit me on the weekend. She can stay for a sleepover tomorrow night. Can shows a possible future action or arrangement. For clear future permission, use will be allowed to. Present perfect permission. Permission across longer time periods. The present perfect talks about permission connected to the past that is still connected to the present. Here are some examples. We have been allowed to eat outside recently. She has been allowed to leave early this week. Students have been allowed to use calculators. In these sentences, permission has started in the past. The permission is important now, and the action happened during a recent period of time. The structure of a question in the present perfect is have or has plus subject plus been allowed to plus base verb. Has he been allowed to call? Have they been allowed to perform? Have you been allowed to play? Negative permission or refusal of permission is prohibition. The structure of the present perfect is subject plus have or has plus not plus been allowed to plus base verb. They have not been allowed to enter. Have or has and not can also be a contraction. Subject plus contraction plus been allowed to plus base verb. They haven't been allowed to enter. Past perfect permission. Permission across longer time periods. The past perfect talks about permission before another event in the past. Here are some examples. We had been allowed to eat outside up until winter. She had been allowed to leave early before the policy changed. Students had been allowed to use calculators before the rule changed. In these sentences, permission existed earlier in the past, another past event happened later, rules or situations changed, and the two past times are compared. The structure of a question in the past perfect is had plus subject plus been allowed to plus base verb. Had he been allowed to call? Had they been allowed to perform? Had you been allowed to play? Negative permission or refusal of permission is prohibition. The structure of the past perfect is subject plus had plus not plus been allowed to plus base verb. We had not been allowed to borrow. Had and not can become a contraction. Subject plus contraction plus been allowed to plus base verb. They hadn't been allowed to borrow. Future perfect permission. Permission across longer time periods. The future perfect talks about permission existing before a future deadline and looking forward to a completed future period. The permission continues over time. Here are some examples. By next month, all employees will have been allowed to use the new software. By his next birthday, he will have been allowed to drive for 1 year. The class will have been allowed to use online dictionaries by the end of the semester. In these sentences, permission exists before a future deadline and continues over time. There will be a completed future period. The structure of a question in the future perfect is will plus subject plus have plus been allowed to plus base verb. Will he have been allowed to call? Will they have been allowed to perform? Will you have been allowed to play? Negative permission or refusal of permission is prohibition. The structure of the future perfect is subject plus will plus not, plus have, plus been allowed to, plus base verb. You will not have been allowed to drive. Will not can become the contraction won't. Remember, won't is irregular. Subject plus contraction plus have plus been allowed to plus base verb. You won't have been allowed to drive. Read the sentences. Circle whether it is permission or prohibition. 1. You can sit here. 2. Employees cannot share passwords. 3. Guests will be allowed to use the pool. 4. You can't bring pets into the restaurant. 5. You may not enter the science lab. 6. We have been allowed to work in groups. 7. Visitors may take photographs. 8. Staff have not been allowed to take an extra break. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answers. Check your answers. 1. You can sit here. This is permission. 2. Employees cannot share passwords. This is prohibition. 3. Guests will be allowed to use the pool. This is permission. 4. You can't bring pets into the restaurant. This is prohibition. 5. You may not enter the science lab. This is prohibition. 6. We have been allowed to work in groups. This is permission. 7. Visitors may take photographs. This is permission. 8. Staff have not been allowed to take an extra break. This is prohibition. Here is an extender for anybody who would like a challenge. Arrange the statements from least formal to most formal. Set 1. Leaving work early. You can leave early today. You're allowed to leave early today. You may leave early today. Set 2. Accessing a building. Staff can enter through the rear entrance. Staff are allowed to enter through the rear entrance. Staff may enter through the rear entrance. Set 3. Using company equipment. Employees can use company laptops at home. Employees are allowed to use company laptops at home. Employees may use company laptops at home. Pause the video. The next slide contains the answers. Check your answers. For this permission scale, there isn't always one absolutely correct answer because register varies by context, but these are the most widely accepted rankings. You can leave early today. Staff can enter through the rear entrance. Employees can use company laptops at home. Can is for everyday spoken English. You're allowed to leave early today. Staff are allowed to enter through the rear entrance. Employees are allowed to use company laptops at home. Be allowed to emphasises permission from an authority. You may leave early today. Staff may enter through the rear entrance. Employees may use company laptops at home. May is formal, often used by managers, HR, official announcements, or written communication. Thank you for joining into the lesson today. I hope you now feel confident using the modal verbs that express permission, the negative form to express prohibition, and the correct structure in sentences and questions. Please like and subscribe for more lessons. There is a lot to learn, so don't give up. Keep believing in yourself and you will learn. See you next time. Bye.